Bonjour.
Good morning. There are post-year-end events not included in the figures. We'll be showing you the Greek contract, the 12 aircraft pre-owned by the French Air Force we're selling to Greece, and new ones. 12 aircraft to replace these aircraft going to Greece. 2020 was marked by the COVID-19 crisis, of course, which is a global crisis. I'll come back to it. For France and Dassault Aviation in particular, international tensions all over the place, which remain a concern for our governments. Terrorism still hitting France and other countries, and the rise of environmental concerns in France, Europe, and the world. 2021 will continue with these uncertainties, with more hope with COVID-19, with vaccines coming in, and the ramping up of vaccination throughout the year. And this should enable a return to quasi-normal conditions by the end of the year and the years to come. The aeronautics crisis, the industry crisis may last a bit longer. So French aviation support plan. So French aviation remains the main topic between different companies, Airbus, Safran, Dassault, and Safran to a lesser extent. So we need a plan to ensure and support the supply chain, because behind these big companies, there are 500 companies in France that suffered, are still suffering from a lower workload because airlines are buying fewer aircraft and have not commissioned a lot of aircraft. So there's a plan. It started with GFAS. It was negotiated with the Ministry of Economy, and it was announced this past June. Beyond partial furlough, temporary unemployment plans, and which allowed our companies to keep employees on board and maintain skills in-house instead of laying off people for the most part, even though some layoffs are happening. There were the state-guaranteed loans to cover cash shortage in SMEs mostly, and we ourselves worked on a fund to be able to look a bit further into the future. This investment fund was implemented by Airbus, Dassault Aviation, and co-funded by the French government. We chose Aero Fund. We raised funds on the institutional market as well. This is an operational fund, and it started working with watchtowers defined at GFS that identify the entire supply chain, and the DGA did the same for the defense industries to be able to access the fund. It has twofold aim. One, offer capital if needed, because we have to modernize the supply chain, like we mentioned, to be competitive in the future. It's not just about surviving today and waiting out the crisis. We also have to be future ready and be ready for things to pick up again. And lastly, other funds were rolled out by the Ministry of Economics of the economy to modernize the economy. And then CORAC, that's a preparation of the future of commercial aviation, as well as helicopters and business jets and airport equipment. It's about looking into the future with breakthrough technology and getting ready for what the French government and Europe want, with the plan developed and the Paris conference and the issues presented to decarbonate part of aviation in the years to come. So that's 1.5 billion euros for 3 years. That's the core package. And this prevents the collapse of the supply chain. I'm not saying everything is fine. There are problems, and they will still be problems when things get better, i.e. when the state support stops with the guaranteed loans or a temporary furlough plan, and it remains to be seen how will organize the reimbursement. But so the fund will be there to help. Dassault Aviation benefited from part of these aids, but not much, 6 million euros of state temporary furlough allowance. And right now, as we speak, that has ended at Dassault, mostly thanks to the Rafale contracts. We also received 8 million euros from CORACT, and we'll get more in the future. And we ourselves paid 1 million euros into the investment fund out of our 13 million euro commitment in the coming months.
So, therefore, throughout this crisis, we have set up the health protocol, which was fundamental protect our employees and the ability to go back to work thanks to this health protocol. We were very much helped by the various federations, the UMM, the MEDEF, so as to harmonize all these measures vis-à-vis the health measures announced by the public authorities. And then we resumed our authorities. Flights were resumed, as you saw in the film. So to say that we did not have any delays, that everything went off well, no. It was a difficult year. We started working again progressively, and very quickly, right from April, we resumed work little by little until the summer, where things became almost normal with a lot of working from home. The fact that a lot of people were working from home and that the resumption was done gradually, this generated a lot of delays in our programs. We could negotiate this with the ministry, but we had a priority plan. Our priority plan was to support our armed forces, which was done without any further ado, without any drop of support. Our teams remained on the spot abroad to support our aircrafts at the other end of the world, and we could deliver our aircraft, the Rafale, which was done throughout 2020. For India, particularly right on time in spite of the COVID, and our Falcons, as you will see later on with our figures, with a slight drop because some of the clients put off their deliveries. But the delivery plan was more or less on time. The 6X also, I'll talk about this. And the work was pursued with our subcontractors, not just with Dassault, but our entire subcontracting chain. The French one and the foreign ones were to pursue their activities. And so they did their work so that we could pursue our preparation and the development of the 6X. As for the Rafale export, we delivered 13 Rafale in 2020. We'll go back to the figures later on. The major fact that was well described in the film was the arrival of the Rafale in India. There was the first ferry and others afterwards, and the Rafale aircraft are operational in the Indian Air Force. And this was really awaited for by our Indian friends. We also pursued, in spite of the travel restrictions, in spite of the issues with traveling, we could pursue prospection abroad. And one of the results was Greece. As for France, we pursued with the standard F4. The F3R is being installed in the French aircraft. This is underway. The F4 is being developed for the future years. That will be the standard in a few years from now. No Rafale deliveries. There's still a production delivery gap in France because of France's military procurement law. This will be the case again next year. We will resume deliveries to France from 2022 onwards, not only for the 28, we're talking about the 42, the 22 aircraft from 22 onwards, but the 12 additional ones that were ordered at the beginning of this year. So that means 40 Rafales to be delivered from 2022 onwards, until we have the fifth batch in France, which will be delivered from 2027 onwards, with orders planned in 2023. But we've already begun some work to prepare the arrival of this fifth batch, and the work will be pursued in 2021. Support, that is very important. This is very dear to our Armed Forces Ministry. And the Ravel France, the Ravel contract, which is the vertical MC. Vertical means that Dassault takes the responsibility of the entire support chain for all the equipment apart from the engine. That is the subject of a separate contract. So therefore, the Ravel is deployed within the French Air Force. This contract was signed in 2019, over 10 years. With the notable element is the setting up of a big data platform that we are going to implement with the help of our Dassault system partner, and with the common use, the joint use between the armed forces and industrialists. Rafale export, you've seen it too. The important point is that we could continue training our pilots. Part of this training is done in the French Air Force. Another part is done in Mérignac, where we've built a conversion training center where we can carry out this training for the pilots and mechanics, for both. Deploying technical support personnel in the countries using the Rafale. This was pursued. They pursued all their assignments, including during the COVID-19 crisis, which did not only impact France. As for the ATL-2, we are pursuing the modernization of ATL-2. This was announced, and now we are implementing the modernization of ATL-2. We have signed with the DMA a verticalized MCO contract, which is called Ocean, and this contract arrived in 2020. It is the same principle. We take the entire chain of suppliers, and we have the engines elsewhere. It is the same principle, and this is a 10-year commitment. The multi-mission Falcons, so we have the Albatros, 7 Falcon 2000 LXS for maritime surveillance were ordered, and there is an option for 5 more. We are pursuing the development of the Archange, which is the electronic war program, which will replace the Transel Gabriel. 2 were ordered in 2019, and there's 1 in option. We have pursued our work on the Falcon 50. Falcon 50 is continuing its operations until the arrival of the Falcon 2000, with modifications in the aircraft so that it can drop SAR kits. So therefore, we will add dropping hatches. Japan has ordered 6 Falcon 2000 maritime surveillance aircraft, and we delivered the 5th one in 2020. Germany, we delivered the DLR. The DLR is the German Aerospace Research Center. We delivered 1 Falcon 2000 to the DLR, and this will be useful so that they can carry out a certain number of experiments. Future Combat Air System. I'd like to remind you that the GCS, the Joint Concept Studies, this is pursued. The contract was signed beforehand. We signed the contract for Phase 1A for the studies on the demonstrators, and especially the NGF, a new generation fighter. And throughout 2020, first it was difficult to work because of the COVID, which stopped the work, but work was pursued, and we could move forward in this phase 1A. The arrival of Spain, the NGF was 2 countries first, France and Germany, and Spain has arrived, and we'll talk about it again. And it has asked for 1/3 of the work. So now we have a rationale where each country has 1/3 of the work. And France is the leader of SCAF, of FCAS, and Dassault is the leader in the phase 1 NGF. I'm going to take your questions later on, but it's true that right now we have a difficulty to develop phase 1B. When I mean develop, that is come up with a proposal that would be agreed upon by all the partners and that would enable us to have a contract before this summer. But there are a lot of hurdles. The breakdown 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 has led the 3 manufacturers, actually the 2, Dassault on the one hand, that will have 1/3, and Airbus that has its share in Germany and its share in Spain, and that will have 2/3. So 1/3 for Dassault, 2/3 for Airbus. That's the first difficulty. But this is a difficulty that Dassault has accepted. Then we have to share the work packages, and there's a strong will from Airbus to have a lot more joint packages. Joint, that means no one is liable. We're doing it together. And here we have agreed on 1/3 of the work packages are joint, and the other half was shared equally between the 3. That means that Dassault has less responsibility in the remaining 50% than the other 2. And we have an additional request, that is to balance out qualitatively the work packages that are sensitive or strategic. And here again, there are a few hurdles. So therefore, we are carrying out discussions, and I'll take your questions later on. So this is an additional difficulty in finding the right contracts on how we can be the leaders, the prime contractors in this organization. And secondly, we have other issues related to intellectual property. The Eurodrone is the opposite. Airbus is the prime leader. Dassault is the subcontractor with a certain number of responsibilities. We were partners in the upstream definition study, and now we are pure subcontractors. This does not pose any problem to me, and we are faithful subcontractors, and Airbus is the prime contractor. We're waiting for this contract to be finalized, and this will be done in 2021. As for the Falcon, the year was more difficult in terms of delivery. You remember that in July I had modified the objectives, so we had gone from 40 Falcons to 30 Falcons, and finally we would have delivered 34 Falcons in 2020, compared to the 40 at the beginning of the year and 30, which was the revised figure in July. This is explained by the fact that clients did not really travel much in 2020 because of the COVID, which restricted traveling. And this also generated economic crisis, a lot of uncertainties about the future. And these uncertainties led our clients to not order new aircraft. They came and collected their aircraft. There was a slight gap. There was this passage from 40 to 30 and then 34, and some aircraft were not sold. So it was very difficult in terms of orders for us. So 15 orders in 2020, out of which the 7 for the French authorities, the National Navy, and 7 Albatros. That means 8 Falcon aircraft sold in 2020. As for the 6X, we did our best to maintain our plans. I'm not saying we didn't have difficulties. I'm not saying we generated delays. There were delays, especially at the beginning of the crisis. It was difficult for everybody, but finally we managed to hold our program, and we wanted to start and have an entry into service at the end of 2022. But it remains difficult because the situation is still quite difficult with our subcontractors. Yesterday and today, we have 6X rolling. The rolling is the phase just before the maiden flight, and I had indicated that the first maiden flight would take place in the first quarter of 2021, and so therefore I think we will keep this promise. The 6X is a 5,000 aeronautical aircraft with the largest cabin on the market, and we have a certain number of orders and discussions underway with clients. The future Falcon, I think this is the last time I'll be frustrating you. We have prepared the announcement for this new aircraft. It will be done in presence if the conditions are better, but I will not wait for some more months to make the announcement. We have tested with the e-rollout of the 6X. We can still keep working in our marketing presentations remotely, and if the conditions are not proper, we will not do it in presence, and we will do it as an e-announcement in the coming months or in the coming weeks. As for the customer support, this is very important. We have done a lot of efforts since a number of years. There is still number one, according to the AIN Specialized magazine, which is an American magazine specialized in this area and in many areas. So we are very satisfied. For 2 running years, we could win this competition of the best company in the area of business jets. Falcon Care, that is the other part of the MCO with associated services, associated Falcon services, and we have signed our 500th Falcon Care contract. I think that our clients are very satisfied by this type of support for their aircraft with all the reactivity required. Co-responsibility, I said it at the beginning. Environment is very important, and what I think is the quickest to implement are the biofuels, all the alternative fuels. Our aircraft today can only use 50% of biofuels. We're working so that they might be compatible at 100% with biofuels. And we are going to set up a biofuel line. We really wish it. This is not only in France, it's in the whole of Europe. And all the majors in the world would like to produce in a green way. We don't want to have deforestation to produce biofuels. Everything has to be compatible with the environment friendly, and we should be able to distribute the biofuels, equip airports with this biofuel capacity, and begin as soon as possible to introduce biofuels, not only in commercial aviation, but in our business jets. This is something in the short term that can really bring down carbon emissions in aviation, which account for 2 or 3% of the carbon emissions in the world. Another eco-responsible approach in the entire aircraft cycle, we talk about recycling a lot, and right from the beginning of the design of an aircraft, we will try to design the recycling through the different lines, the metal line, the battery line, etc., so that we can choose this equipment or that equipment because then it could be recycled. This process of extended design office has encompassed this too, which is eco-responsibility. Active participation in the French, European, and international environmental research programs. Clean aviation, we are in Clean Sky and CESAR, so we'll be able to prepare these future technologies in a certain number of areas. Reducing our carbon footprint by the way in which we navigate, the way in which the Falcon crews can use software that optimize flight plans according to the fuel utilization. If you have optimized routes, if you are on time, then you can more easily reduce your consumption during a trip, and this for each flight, for each crew. And the last point, we are, of course, part of the hydrogen, the new breakthrough technologies, and we want to lighten our aircraft and consume less also. The transformation plan, I'll just say one word. It was pursued in spite of the COVID crisis. It was slowed down, but we are still developing our new digital tools, for example, big data, with the verticalized MCO and with our armies. This is being deployed, and we are pursuing the integration of new Dassault system tools like 3D experience so as to generalize this in the company. The industrial performance, we are preparing for the future. We want to be better in all areas, and the infrastructure upgrades that I've already mentioned, and this is being pursued. This was slowed down because the entire public sector was at a standstill for a certain number of months, so there are certain delays in the setting up of this infrastructure. But we are following all this, and all our sites, as you can see, are affected by this upgrading, and this will allow the company to properly work in all these different lines with these different tools so that we can prepare for the future. This is true in France. This is true within Dassault Aviation and also at Le Bourget in our subsidiaries. It's also true in our foreign subsidiaries at DFJ in India, where we are developing. And you will see a film which will show you where we've reached in India, because we talked a lot about India in the past few years, and you're going to see the first results. And the plan covers the integration of our new service centers. We suffered about that in 2020 because of the drop in air traffic. And I'm going to show you the film, which will be a very good illustration rather than this slide. You're going to see the results we've acquired. So you see work in progress. Our ambition is to go all the way to the final assembly of a Falcon 2000, and we already started making Rafale parts. So ramping up Indian style is always too long. But as you see in the film, it's not just images. It's not just pictures. It's really happening. We're very happy with the workforce. And when COVID hit, we repatriated our French teams from Nagpur because it was a bit more complicated there than on Indian Air Force bases. And the work kept up. We've already integrated parts made in Nagpur in our aircraft, certified by the same principles as all our parts for Falcons. As to CSR, we are interested in social impact at Dassault too. We're very honored and proud to say we were ranked #1 of French aviation, navy, and space companies in terms of GHG reduction. So our determination to pay attention to those areas is paying off. It's an effort
significant effort we're making on all of our sites. For example, Marignac, we planted hundreds, if not thousands, of trees to offset buildings we built. And now to the financials. You can see the 15 Falcons I mentioned here, the 34 deliveries I mentioned, which gives us a backlog of 34. Rafale, no additional order because the Greeks came in and the French Delta came in early 21, so it will be in this year's results. 13 deliveries planned will go up in the coming year. It adds up to 62, but this does not include the Greek and other aircraft we already delivered to India and the French orders. So 3.5 billion euros for our order intake, net sales of 5.5, and a backlog of 15.9 billion euros at the end of 2020. What's most representative of the business and the balance between areas of business is what you see in the middle, the net sales. You see, it's basically 10% of what we do is in France, 40% from Falcons, and 50% from exports. So you see the civilian military balance 60-40, and France international is 10% for France, 90% international. Investments, in spite of the crisis and in agreement with our shareholders, as recommended by the board, we did not reduce our investments, be it in terms of getting ready for the future, technology investments, or modernizing our infrastructures, i.e. our industrial investments. R&D is self-funded R&D, 538 million euros, similar to the previous year. So we did not reduce our effort. In spite of the crisis, we kept up the effort thanks to 6X and the new Falcon I can't tell you about yet, as well as technologies to be future ready. Thales published its results yesterday, 937 adjusted net result. And part of that feeds into dividend. This net margin is 5.5% for 2020, which is down compared to 2019, like for many of us. And on that basis, we are calculating our net income. So operating income, 261 million euros. So that's 4.8% operating margin, which is down from 2019, of course. So after reducing taxes and computing the link with Thales, the net income is 396 million euros, a net margin of 7.2%, earnings per share of 47.6 euros, down from 2019. Once again, we didn't pay any dividends, not even any installment, while we kept paying incentives and profit sharing. Cash, we're using the cash to deliver Rafales. So it's natural. It goes down. That's the way the working capital works. Dividends, we paid 103 million euros in 2020 and 0 in 2019. for 2019, when we were supposed to pay 212. The payout is still the same, so the dividend per share is 12.3 euros. Next to that, in 2019, we kept paying profit sharing and incentives to employees, and in 2020, the level it will be 85 million euros. Split of the par value of the share. We've been wondering, or people have asked us about this for years. So with the agreement of the board, we're going to propose a split by 10, so we can align our share value with our peers in the industry. So if it's 930 euros, I'm not sure exactly what it is yet. If you divide it by 10, it'll be just below 100. And when it goes up, it'll be just above 100. Sometimes it's gone up to above 1,000. So this will allow small investors to buy our shares. So it'll make the share more liquid. And this will happen in the second half year because it takes time. One of the conclusions for 2020 is that, first of all, our dual model is quite relevant and resilient in such an extraordinary crisis. For 2021, our top actions will be to keep exporting Rafales. It's fully mature, and the advent of the first export contracts, Egypt, India, Qatar, and now Greece, are giving rise to more demand from other countries, and we'd like to honor these as soon as possible. I know you'll ask me when. It's harder to say. Secondly, we're going to go back to selling Falcons. It'll depend on how the crisis pans out and its aftermath. After the end of the health crisis, will we see an economic recovery? In which case, sales will pick up again quite naturally. Otherwise, it might take a bit longer. And for us, Dassault and Falcons, we're looking at the new aircraft coming in with the Falcon 66, and the new aircraft we'll be presenting soon, which will drive recovery. Military developments, the new Falcons that's underway, keeping our engineers busy, our design team busy. And we are wondering about SCAF and NGF. Will we be able to launch this future phase? Will Airbus secure the Eurodrone contract is another question. We'll keep supporting our aircraft, and I hope we stay at the top of the pyramid in terms of support ranking. Might be harder to achieve because we flew less, and we're continuing with our Make in India, developing the activities transferred to DRAL. Our guidance for 2021, delivery of 25 Rafale. That's in the contract. That's the contracts we signed, and as usual, a careful guidance of 25 Falcon. And there's still a lot of uncertainty because of the COVID crisis and its impact on the business jet market. But sales will be going up this year.